Hey guys, Matt here with a pretty big update video surrounding both the HUNDEGNI investigation and the mysterious LUCID investigation group. There's a lot of information to cover here, including an actual solid message between HUNDEGNI 2.9 and 3.6. So let's just jump right into how all of this got started. On February 7th of 2019, a user called LucidNum19 made a post to our relatively new HUNDEGNI subreddit entitled New Endeavors. Most of our active work is on the Discord server, so this post was not noted until several days later, wherein we discovered an attached photo seemingly showing off a chat room wherein several Lucid users are speaking to one another. Much of the conversation is difficult to fully comprehend through such a small portion of available text, but among these words, the Lucid members seem to be speaking about how something was going to change on the 23rd, and therefore required work of some kind or screenshots to be taken prior to the alteration. What they meant by this is not entirely certain, as Mangled has no upload dates associated with the 23rd, and to be sure, nothing has seemingly been altered on either the HUNDEGNI YouTube or Twitter page. Nevertheless, whatever this change really was, Lucid number 9, as evidenced by the numbers besides each comment, brings up our HUNDEGNI Hunter group as being a possible solution to their conundrum. While brushed off by some, LucidNum19, the same user who would go on to join our subreddit, stated that he was willing to give us a push. This is followed by a message from LucidNumber1, who asks if this is in reference to something called D5. 19 doesn't answer that statement directly, instead seemingly clarifying himself to be talking about helping us solve videos from the 3.x series. All of this was seemingly included in the New Endeavors post as a way of making it clear what 19 was there to do, as well as to provide some evidence that he was actually a part of Lucid and not just a troll. Before we move on to our responses to this post, there are some additional notes about this image that deserve to be highlighted. For example, we were initially thrown off by the dates, seen to the far right of each comment, as they seemingly indicated the messages were posted nearly a year ago, approximately around April 12th of 2018. Thankfully, some of our members were quick to point out that these dates could be formatted in accordance to UK practices, wherein the date is written as day, month, then year, as opposed to the American month, day, and year. With that in mind, this whole conversation seemed to take place around December 4th of 2018, still a relatively long time ago, but not as far back as the alternate option. It is our belief that Lucid simply plans things out a while in advance, perhaps settling decisions with nearly every member before actually carrying them out. This is further backed up when one looks at when Lucid19 created his account, December 15th of 2018, 2 months before it even made any contact with us. Also bizarre is the way this image was processed before being sent to us. It appears that an original screenshot was taken, then the top and bottom portions were cropped out. The photo was then placed on a white backdrop with a real-life camera, then snapping a lopsided shot of it, only for a large black box to then be applied to the lower right corner. Additional research on the photo has indicated it has seemingly been saved and copied many times over, resulting in a gradual loss of quality and perhaps also leading to this strange checker pattern, which appears when the image is put through photo forensics. Why all these steps were enacted is anyone's guess, but I personally believe that once again the photo had to be approved by multiple Lucid members, resulting in several individuals making changes to the image with little regard to its clarity. Interestingly, the original screenshot was cropped in just the right way as to show off half a line of text at the top and another at the bottom. This has led some of us to believe that Lucid wanted us to take a peek at these words and try to make sense of them. Unfortunately, the text at the top seems a bit too cluttered to make out, but the bottom text has been slightly transcribed as possibly reading, 19. Continue your communication, we'll be watching. That's if this blank worth it. This ultimately doesn't tell us too much beyond the fact that 19 was approved to eventually speak to our group, though the fact that they mentioned they'd be watching, as well as the fact that Lucid number 1 previously mentioned all work at keeping an eye on us should be left to Lucid 15, leads us to believe that there are indeed multiple Lucid spies within our Discord server, likely watching over many of our discussions and feeding important information back to Lucid. In the end, there is little we can do about such activities. As if all of this wasn't leaving us with enough questions already, we can't even figure out what site, if any, utilizes this chat room design. We've all agreed that it appears to be an older server of some type, or modeled after an older one, but nothing quite fits the bill. Our best guess is that the chat room exists on an entirely private server created from the ground up or utilizing a very simplistic code. Considering how secretive Lucid tries to be, this isn't that far of a stretch, as having a private server would allow them to chat and do basically whatever they pleased without answering to anyone. Ultimately, unless a match suddenly pops up, we'll just have to keep guessing. But it's extremely likely we're looking at only a single page from that server here, with other pages accessible off-screen or beneath the black box. Honestly, we're not sure what else could be obscured by the black box in this position, really. Some of us have likened it to display windows often used to capture the face of a person using a computer, like what you see in gaming videos, though why someone would actively be using a camera here is unknown. Lastly, I should briefly point out all the users we see present in this chat, as in addition to Lucid 19, 1, and 9, we also see Lucid numbers 5, 10, 12, and what appears to be 8, as well as the mention of 15. If we factor in Lucid 4 and 16 as well, this means that the Lucid group has a minimum of 10 active members. We've theorized over how the group could remain so secretive and self-sustaining without leaks or the need to advertise to outside sources respectively. The conclusion which seems the most likely is that the Lucid group are friends in real life or have known each other for a long time and therefore are better able to keep each other in check. We'll still be referring back to this image several times from here on, but for now, let's go ahead and move on to the subreddit post itself. Our initial reaction to the thread was one of skepticism at 19's validity. Hoping to ease our concerns, I asked if 19 would be willing to offer additional proof of his Lucid ties, perhaps by sending a private message to one of us through the Lucid number 4 Twitter profile. Unfortunately, while 19 understood our misgivings, he stated he was incapable of impacting anything outside of the subreddit thread. This concept would be echoed in another statement wherein he refused to respond to or send private messages on Reddit in general. Clearly, this did not bode well for his image, but we nevertheless continued with our questions. Keep in mind, I won't be reading all of these in order of when they were posted, rather I will simply be moving down the list of comments so as to not miss anything. I'll also move by some of them somewhat quickly, or skip fairly irrelevant answers entirely so that this video isn't terribly long. One of my following questions was in regard to the burn a fear solution we'd gotten from 2.6 and 3.2, as some of us had considered that this message may have been coincidental and not intended by Mangled. Lucid 19 eased these fears in stating that the solution had not been considered accidental. The next comment, one which we all took interest in, was simply in relation to whether Lucid could be deemed a friend or a foe of the HUNDEGNI hunters. Considering Lucid's strangely confrontational Twitter post towards Mangled, this was indeed a question worth asking. As will be noted in many other Lucid 19 replies, the responses to our queries often dodge specific points, answering them to some degree but not in a way that's immediately straightforward or satisfying. 19 merely stated he was happy to assist us, seemingly indicating a goodwill but not saying it outright, as if there was more that was being kept from us. 19 went on to elaborate that his purpose was to act as a guide and that, in exchange for his efforts, Lucid trusted that the HUNDEGNI hunters would assist them in a future project. We'll touch more on this later. We went on to ask for help with HUNDEGNI 3.3, one of the most confounding videos featuring the orbit code. 19's response to this was exceptionally strange, as he'd state, "Your orbit code has presented substantial research. 1. The orbit code can be solved without the need for outside sources and videos. 2. The orbit is read as a clock, middle, top, right, bottom, left. 3. Think alphabetically. Think of it like a brain. Perhaps your luck will surpass our own." Much of this advice, as we point out to 19, we were already aware of, with many of us already thinking alphabetically in relation to the code, and also assuming it could be solved without looking for some outside key. Additionally, the concept of reading the code like a clock is perhaps one of our oldest certainties regarding the orbit code. It's the final point of thinking of the code like a brain which has thrown us off slightly. Considering that this detail was saved for last, it's likely to be the linchpin in making sense of the orbit puzzle. We've considered he may be referring to different lobes of the brain, or the idea of information moving along certain set pathways, but nothing tangible has come from these thoughts. To make matters sketchier, 19's parting words of "perhaps your luck will surpass our own" seems to imply the Lucid group has not solved 3.3, but this, of course, would conflict with all of these pieces of advice. Pieces of advice which 19 stated were more than enough to assist us. It's answers like this and a few others which have led many of us to assume that 19 is not a native English speaker, as some of his word choices can appear quite stilted or improper. The additional fact that all of his responses would appear in batches during incredibly early hours of the day also seemed to indicate 19 was operating in a vastly different time zone. As such, some of the ways 19 phrases things may need to be given a bit of leeway. An alternate theory which is also worth considering is that Lucid is drawing inspiration from figures like a Jingnit Nyup or Unhinged Shadow from the Pointing Ninja mystery, speaking in cryptic and sometimes clunky dialogue to add an air of mystery to themselves. I really hope this isn't the case, since both AJ and Unhinged had solid reasons for the way they spoke, and copying them in this way seems to miss that point. But if Lucid has truly decided to speak in this manner to add a certain flair or persona to their group's name, there is little we can do to dissuade them. Moving on, a user later questioned what Lucid's vague upcoming project was all about, only for 19 to respond that details would be saved for a future date, with methods of reaching out to us about said project still being debated. It's difficult to draw too many conclusions about this project due to 19's lack of details, but if I had to take a guess, I'd say it could be in relation to the mysterious D5 subject mentioned within the New Endeavors photo. I believe this image has a bigger purpose than merely providing itself as evidence of 19's legitimacy. It's perhaps acting as a hint towards the existence of D5 without going too far. Indeed, this would also explain the conversation of getting screenshots and things changing after a certain number of days. Lucid is likely not referring to Mangled's content here, but rather to content of their own, or perhaps something in between. Ultimately, I'll refrain from delving too far into what D5 perhaps is until another video. The following question asked to what depth was Lucid's involvement in the mystery, as well as if they were working with Mangled or against them. With yet another dodgy reply, 19 simply stated that Lucid handles its work very seriously and carries these feelings over into how they behave. He'd also mentioned the third HUNDEGNI series has intrigued them due to its inventiveness, clearly a reference to how codes have spiked in difficulty and the like. Once again, I can't draw too much from this without endlessly speculating. However, 19 did seem to want to make it clear that Lucid doesn't think of the Mangled case as a game or a challenge, at least not in the same manner as the HUNDEGNI hunters do. To them, for some reason, it's something to take very seriously. In a somewhat straighter reply to a question regarding who Mangled's audience was and why Lucid behaved so mysteriously, 19 simply confirmed the videos were not intended for the Lucid group and echoed the early words of Lucid number 16 in stating that the goals of the Lucid investigation team are quite different than ours. On a similar note, 19 would also state that Mangled videos were likely meant for a wider audience, though his end goals were debated. This latter statement seems to be in response to the prior theory that Lucid and Mangled were enemies, indicating that Lucid is not sure where Mangled is going with the videos, but that some fear over where the videos end is what fuels much debate within Lucid and results in the threats. An ongoing theory of ours is that Lucid may be split in half at the moment, with some individuals wanting to shut Mangled down, while others prefer to take a slower, more logical approach. When asked about how to find the link to HUNDEGNI 2.5, 19 responded with what many of us had already assumed, that the link could be found within HUNDEGNI 3.4, adding that Lucid had been discussing it recently for some reason that may or may not become clear to us. Spoiler alert, it didn't become clear to us, at least not yet. 19 did add sometime later that no outside videos were required to get the 2.5 link and that the solution simply hinged on how how one reads the columns. He added in a few more brief tips on solving 3.4, but we've ultimately yet to figure out exactly how the code works, even after placing some of our guesses through permutation programs and running hundreds of possibilities through YouTube. Fearing that 19 may drop off the subreddit with no warning, I did ask him at one point how long he'd be providing assistance. The cutoff date was revealed to be March 8th, which 19 did ultimately stick to without fail. There were a couple days during this questioning period where 19 did not respond at all, only to pick up like nothing had happened the next day. Our best bet is that many, if not all of 19's answers to our questions had to be approved by Lucid as a whole beforehand, which could take quite a bit of time or be delayed when important individuals were too busy to look over the work or 19 was too late to craft proper responses afterwards. Once again, the prior statement that Lucid takes its work seriously leads us to believe that their every comment or response is painstakingly measured. When asked if the footage shown throughout the 3.x series could legitimately be from 2006, as the videos would suggest, 19 responded it did appear legitimate, but this seemed to be more of a general opinion than anything based off solid fact. In a rare display of blunt honesty, 19 would go on to admit that Lucid has been unable to track down the real-world locations featured in 1.x or 3.x, though steps were being taken to overcome this. I'd imagine these steps are quite similar to our own, utilizing Google Maps and the like to scope out areas, though it's possible some footwork is at play. Similar honesty can be found when 19 was asked about the more recent HUNDEGNI 3.8. 19 admitted debate still surrounds this video, meaning that perhaps Lucid isn't quite as impressive at code solving as they may have wanted us to originally believe. 19 would later inform us that despite Lucid's efforts to the contrary, Mangled has still never directly contacted them. It seems that Mangled remains quiet towards just about everyone and isn't picking favorites, which was a bit of a relief for us. 19 was later asked about the Lucid number 4 Kiwi account we had found, confirming it did belong to them and that the attached message was not intended for us. This makes me think more than ever that the strange code on the account's profile is simply a message for other Lucid members. Speaking of Lucid number 4, when asked about the old Marpisha Korisha tweet made by the account, 19 stated it was an attempt at getting a response from Mangled, which ultimately it looks like did not work, though some could debate this as the surprise 3.4 video was uploaded not long afterwards. 19 was also asked about the obituary, which originally alerted us to Lucid's existence. 19 would reply that their attempts at reaching out to a certain individual was cut short, likely a polite way of reminding us that it was our discovery of the obituary that prompted Lucid to remove it early. Interestingly, he included that their target's relationship to Mangled varies. We haven't really discussed too much about what this could exactly mean just yet, since there's just so much information to dig through right now, but it's something we'll have to keep in mind. Before we start moving on to the bigger stuff, a quick note should be made about HUNDEGNI 2.6, as when asked if there was yet another code following the tilde mark in the wall of letters, 19 responded this did not appear to be the case. In one final reply regarding help with 3.3, Lucid number 19 stated that non-uniform sectors designate a focus on different passings, which may be the most confusing way to word a sentence any of us have ever seen. Be that as it may, we mostly agree that this piece of advice is speaking of the quadrants in 3.3, which rest atop the circles, rather than falling in line as many of the other colors do. These are non-uniform sectors. Furthermore, the presence of these sectors apparently are meant to indicate that another passing has been made. Since 19 did earlier state that 3.3 is meant to be read as a clock, it's likely that we are supposed to read the inner colors first and only focus on the non-uniform sectors once a full clockwise rotation has been made. Fascinatingly, the one question Lucid 19 did not answer during his presence on the subreddit asked whether his Lucid group had any connections to Arrows of Heaven. This could indicate a couple things. Either Lucid is somehow related to AOH and refuse to even give hints on the matter, or they want us to think they're related. I could honestly fall to either side of this argument, but it certainly seems to be one of importance that may factor into why Lucid behaves the way it does. A particularly great question was later posed, asking 19 if there were any HUNDEGNI videos we believed we had solved but were incorrect in our assumptions or had missed something. While he didn't go into detail, again, 19 did point out that Lucid would advise greater work on HUNDEGNI 2.2 and 2.4, two videos that I think none of us expected to see brought up again. Some work has been done in trying to find exactly what 19 is referring to here. As far as 2.2 is concerned, the binary we've been able to make out on the walls appears to be 010001, which is hexadecimal for the number 11. Perhaps coincidentally, the Roman numeral version of 11 is XI. Taking things a step further, one should recall that we solved HUNDEGNI 2.6's main message by skipping 11 letters at a time. In that sense, maybe 11 being present in 2.2 was meant as an early hint in how to later solve 2.6. But why Lucid would bother bringing this up after we solved 2.6 regardless of that number is unknown. Either 19 merely mentioned it out of interest in completion, or there's still something else to 2.2 that we're missing. As for 2.4 though, we still haven't the faintest idea what has been overlooked. And that leaves us with just one more comment of importance, Lucid's response to a question regarding help with 2.9. Lucid's response here stated that 3.6 was necessary to solve this video and that we were incredibly close to solving this at one point, further backing up the idea that Lucid has been silently observing us and keeping tabs on what we found. With 19 stressing just how close we were to solving this video, many of us turned back to old conversations surrounding 2.9 and 3.6. One common theory suggested that the lights, which flash in 2.9, could pair with the colors of 3.6 once inverted. Deciding to list out the letters of each accompanying color in each row resulted in the following groups. It's easy to miss, but if one is to only focus on the first letter of each of these new rows, the phrase "take us instead" can be found. Major thanks should go to Great Dan and Writer ID for their excellent work at tackling this, finally putting two unsolved videos to rest for the most part. While the inclusion of the word "us" within this message did throw me off a little at first, other members on our server did point out that this wasn't the first time Mangled referred to a group of people, such as the old 1.x message, "The fog is not real, we never lost our way." It's clear that Mangled is lamenting some event which took away an individual or set of individuals, with Mangled feeling he and others should have been taken as an alternative. Certainly this theory would fit in quite well with the story of Brett's original group of friends who felt they were responsible for his death and should endure some punishment for their actions. The disembodied voices heard throughout 3.6 could also factor into this message, perhaps being the voices of those friends themselves. But once again, this leads us to question why Mangled chooses to hardly ever refer back to PlayStation Home and to the Pointing Ninja mystery. If it was so vital, one would expect references in nearly every video. It did surprise us to find that 2.9 and 3.6 worked together to form such a small code. Not only are there many videos between the two, but they were uploaded almost a full year apart. In the end, this would seem to only strengthen the idea that Mangled is willing to tie together videos over great expanses of time, and that the messages don't have to get longer or more detailed, which is a bit disappointing, but not wholly unexpected. In the end, it's this piece of advice that perhaps best allowed us to finally trust 19's claims of being involved with Lucid, but by no means does it necessarily confirm it. Certainly, 19 did display traits not often seen in simple trolls, as he seemed to be incredibly patient at carrying out his work, providing observable evidence of sorts, and also seeming to have a proper understanding of the mystery as a whole, though a dash of skepticism when it comes to subjects such as this is advised just to be safe. Of course, there are tons of questions we wished we'd asked prior to 19's leaving, especially involving the D5 project and the 2.8 solution, Sarah, as well as the hidden clips on the Lucid number 4 Kiwi account, but it seems as if these questions will have to wait until Lucid eventually returns for assistance with their upcoming project. It seems they need us now, and with any luck, the two of our groups can eventually settle any differences between us and work to solve the HUNDEGNI videos as a cohesive team. And that brings us to the end of this huge update video. As always, thanks should go to everyone on our Discord server and on our subreddit, with the links to both down in the description. So until 3.9 graces us with its confounding presence, that's all for now, guys. Matt, out.